We need to drain the swamp. Washington is full of people who are only looking out for themselves. We will make America wealthy again.
Monday, the news was all about how Anthony Scaramucci had been fired after 10 tumultuous days as a communications director. Tuesday, the story was about how the president had in fact helped Donald Trump Jr. draft a statement about that meeting with the Russians at Trump Tower, something the White House had previously denied. Wednesday, they rolled out their immigration plan, which immediately had critics saying, this doesn't sound like the American dream to us. Thursday, it was about the transcripts of those phone calls between President Trump and the President of Mexico and the President of Australia and all the uproar over that. And now, of course, we're talking all about Robert Mueller issuing subpoenas for a grand jury out there, and the Russia probe may be looking at the president's finances.
And by the way, the idea of cutting back on visas and slashing legal immigration in half was not well received by Congress either. GOP Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina had this to say.
South Carolina's economy, the number one is agriculture, number two is tourism. So my farmers, my hotel owners, my restaurant owners have a hard time finding labor. It's not that Americans are lazy, but these jobs are just hard to fill. And when you can't find an American worker, you can get a legal visa. It's a win-win. You take that and cut it in half, it will destroy South Carolina's economy. Other than that, it's a good idea.
Trump administration's problems with email don't end there, because now we have new information about the very real email exchange with Donald Trump Jr., in which he was offered dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. As you may recall, Don Jr.'s story about those emails and the subsequent meeting changed several times. At first, he claimed the meeting was primarily about adoptions, which turned out to be a lie. At the time, President Trump said he knew nothing about it, but now the Washington Post is reporting that Trump actually dictated his son's misleading statement on that meeting with the Russian lawyer. Yes.
But first, this.
Breaking news to report. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating Russia's interference in the 2016 election, has impaneled a grand jury. He is also investigating any possible collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign and whether the president himself had engaged in obstruction of justice.
That's right. Give me your wealthy, your rich, your huddled MBAs yearning to be tax-free. Send these, the English-speaking, fully insured, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door and lift my leg upon your filthy poor. P.S. No fatties, please.
Separation of powers are more important than ever before. Clearly, President Trump wants a win, and there are going to be folks who embrace the situational ethics of it to say, let's discard the filibuster standard when we're in power. People on both sides do it, but they'd be...
The president will enable, to the extent that he has control, the CSR payments to those markets so they stay stabilized.
I think we've said from the very beginning, the time that he got into office, that we'd look at these on a month-by-month basis, and that position has not changed.
But aren't you then holding those payments hostage and encouraging the insurers to do exactly what they're doing, which is to say we're going to have to raise premiums because of the uncertainty, the exact same uncertainty that you say is the problem?
Chris, we're having the exact same conversation we had 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, because I feel like you're dancing around the reality that you need those payments in order to stabilize the markets, and if you're holding...
Russia's told the United States to cut the number of diplomatic staff it has in the country by the 1st of September. It's a move that follows the approval of new anti-Russian sanctions by the Senate in Washington. We can go live to Central...
Richard, let me give you the final word. Is this black and white in terms of its implication, regardless of what actually happened in the meeting? Let's assume in the meeting it was a whole lot of nothing.
Well, yes, this is something that never should happen. This is not the way politics is done in the United States. I do not know of any other examples of politicians going to foreign governments for opposition research for the dirt on their political opponents.
You paused. You appreciated that moment. I mean, what do you say to that response?
It's essential that Congress fund...
The officers that were behind him applauding and cheering about a comment that he made about police brutality should be ashamed of themselves. American modern law enforcement is not anymore about roughing people up. It's not about slamming people into cars. It's about community-oriented policing. It's about knowing your community and treating everyone with respect. Even
on Wednesday, a new Quinnipiac poll was released showing that Donald Trump's approval rating has actually fallen to 33%. This is a...
Get out. So he's been on a lot of vacations. I mean, I think by the end of August, he will have spent about 53 days in office playing around, like vacationing, compared with the 15 days Obama took through August 2009.
So he said, he didn't expect what he got in this job, but he came down hard on President Obama for how much he golfed. And when you compare the numbers, it's kind of like I'd at least like a recognition of, okay, I didn't know it's more fun to golf than be the president.
To happy hour, there's more breaking news tonight. About 24 hours after it was revealed, the new White House communications director called him an effing paranoid schizophrenic and accused him of being a leaker. Chief of Staff Reince Priebus is out as Chief of Staff. General John.
The House has just passed a spending bill that includes a down payment for a U.S. border wall with Mexico. The measure would provide $1.6 billion to begin that project. Money was tucked into a $788 billion spending plan. Also calls for combining the Pentagon budget with veterans programs.
64 civil rights law does not protect a gay worker from employment discrimination, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Skydiving instructor Donald Zarda sued his employer, claiming he was fired in 2010 after a client complained he was gay. The DOJ isn't a party to the case, but filed an amicus, or friend of the court brief, with the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on July 26th. The DOJ argues Congress never intended the civil rights protections in Title VII to apply to gay workers.
Session is fired. There will be holy hell to pay. Any effort to go after Mueller could be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency, unless
a sitting congressman wants the President of the United States investigated for threatening an American state, specifically Donald Trump's threat to the state of Alaska. We're now learning more about the nature of the threats that were issued by the Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, to...
Now, the U.S. Senate has just approved that new round of sanctions against Russia, Iran and North Korea. An overwhelming majority voted in favor of the bill. During the hearing, senators repeatedly referred to allegations of Russian meddling in last year's U.S. presidential election.
Grand jury has reportedly issued subpoenas in connection with Donald Trump Jr.'s campaign meeting with a Russian lawyer. Individuals familiar with the special counsel's investigation say it includes Russian interference in the election, Russian hacking, and possible financial wrongdoing.
It's a major step by Robert Mueller in his investigation. Also, new details CNN has learned about how Mueller and his team are following the money trail, perhaps crossing what President Trump agreed was a red line he didn't think Mueller should cross. And
does anyone really believe that story?
The Russia investigation continues to widen as federal investigators explore the potential financial ties of President Trump and associates to Russia.
We have another leak now. This is about a conversation that President Trump had with President Enrique Peña Nieto on January 27th. So a little while back, he gets into office. One of the first calls he makes, understandably, is to our neighbor to the south. And remember, he had as his top campaign issue the wall. But when he calls it, so what I would like to recommend is, if we're going to have continued dialogue, we will work out the wall. They're going to say, who's going to pay for the wall, Mr. President? To both of us. And we should both say, we will work it out. It will work out in the formula somehow. As opposed to you saying we will not pay and me saying we will not pay.
After the Boy Scouts Association of America was forced to come out and say that nobody from their organization actually called Donald Trump to tell him what a great speech he gave to their jamboree last week, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, during Wednesday's White House press briefing, was forced to come out and say, okay, listen, the phone calls that Donald Trump said happened, both between the Boy Scouts and the one with the president of Mexico congratulating him on his work on the border, Sarah Huckabee Sanders admitted that neither of those phone calls actually happened. Now,
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting. Jim.
U.S. federal prosecutors have subpoenaed Kushner Companies, the real estate development business owned by the family of Jared Kushner, regarding its use of an immigration visa program. The Wall Street Journal says the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney's Office issued a subpoena concerning a Jersey City, New Jersey, development project financed in part by the federal visa program known as EB-5.
U.S. Attorney subpoenas Kushner companies over EB-5. New York federal prosecutors have issued a subpoena to Kushner companies over the developer's use of the EB-5 visa program.